What if I told you the US government might be sitting on a hidden lever? A financial switch so powerful it could unlock hundreds of billions of dollars without passing a single new spending bill, without raising a single tax, and without technically adding one penny to the national debt? Sounds impossible, right? But behind closed doors, former President Donald Trump and his economic team are talking about a play that could do exactly that. It involves two of the most explosive assets on the planet, gold and Bitcoin, and a series of quiet policy moves that most Americans have never even heard of. Think about it for a second. What happens if Washington suddenly declares that the gold buried deep inside Fort Knox is worth not $42 an ounce, not even a few hundred, but thousands of dollars more, instantly creating money out of thin air? What happens if the government decides to hold on to confiscated Bitcoin, treating it like a national treasure instead of auctioning it off? Could those digital coins become a brand new reserve for the US dollar? And here's the bigger question. If gold and Bitcoin can be repriced or revalued on paper, what stops the Federal Reserve from issuing fresh dollars against those values, flooding the economy with brand new money while technically claiming there's no new debt at all? It sounds like financial science fiction. Yet pieces of this strategy are already being drafted, signed, and tested. History even shows it's been done before. Not with crypto, of course, but with gold revaluations that once rescued the US economy during a crisis nearly a century ago. But if it really is that simple, why isn't every economist cheering? Could this be the magic fix for America's $35 trillion debt? Or a ticking time bomb that could rattle the dollar, spike inflation, and shake the entire global financial system? In the next few minutes, we're going to pull back the curtain on this gold and crypto plan, how it works, why it's getting serious attention, and what it could mean for your wallet, your savings, and the future of the US dollar itself. Stay with me, because once you hear the details, you'll never look at money or the government's balance sheet the same way again. Let's start with the reality that almost no one wants to think about. The United States is buried under a mountain of IOUs, more than $37 trillion worth of them. That number is so huge, it almost stops making sense. It's bigger than the entire economies of China and Japan combined, and it grows every single day, hour by hour, whether Congress is in session or not. Now here's the part that should make every taxpayer's stomach tighten. Your federal tax dollars, the money you send in every April, aren't just paying for roads, healthcare, or national defense. A massive chunk of it is being siphoned off just to cover interest on that gigantic debt. Not the debt itself, just the interest payments. Think about it. It's like paying the minimum on a maxed-out credit card while the balance keeps climbing. So how did we get here? The math is painfully simple. Every year, Washington collects money through taxes. Then Washington spends way more than it takes in. Defense budgets, healthcare programs, Social Security checks, infrastructure projects. The list is endless. And when the bills are bigger than the paycheck, what does the government do? It borrows. Again and again. Treasury bonds are issued, investors buy them, and the national tab balloons higher. For 2025 alone, projections show something shocking. The government expects to collect roughly $5 trillion in taxes, but plans to spend closer to $7 trillion. That leaves a $2 trillion gap, which will be filled by, you guessed it, more borrowing. $2 trillion in a single year, piled right on top of an already staggering debt mountain. And here's where it gets even more expensive. Interest rates aren't near zero anymore. Since the early pandemic years, the Federal Reserve has raised rates to fight inflation. And that means every new dollar the government borrows comes with a higher interest bill. Higher rates plus higher debt equals a budget where more and more tax revenue goes straight to interest instead of actual services. So what's Washington's backup plan? For decades, whenever the numbers didn't add up, the federal government has leaned on its powerful partner, the Federal Reserve. The Fed can literally create dollars out of thin air. It buys government bonds, pumps new money into the system, and gives Congress breathing room. But that solution creates another headache. When you flood the economy with newly printed dollars, the value of each existing dollar slowly erodes. That's called inflation, and we've all felt it. At the gas pump, at the grocery store. every time rent or mortgage rates jump. This is the vicious cycle the U.S. now faces. Borrow more to spend more, print more to pay more. Watch prices climb higher while the national debt climbs even faster. It's a feedback loop with no easy exit, and it's the reason bold, even risky proposals, like the gold and crypto plan you're about to hear, are suddenly back on the table in Washington. Because if nothing changes, interest payments alone could one day eat up every spare dollar the government collects. And when that happens, taxpayers won't just be funding programs, they'll be funding the world's largest, most expensive credit card bill. Now, let's step into something most people have no idea even exists, a financial trick hiding in plain sight. The U.S. government's gold play. This isn't a rumor, it's a page right out of American history. Nearly a century ago, during the dark days after the Great Depression, President Franklin D. Roosevelt made a bold move. He ordered the official price of gold to jump from roughly $20 an ounce to about $35. It sounded shocking at the time, but overnight that single revaluation unlocked billions of brand new spending power for Washington without printing a single extra tax form. That's right, no new law, no vote to raise debt, just a stroke of policy that instantly made the government's gold stash worth more on paper. Fast forward to today, and that same idea is back on the table. Only this time the numbers are way bigger, and the stakes are global. The plan? Value America's current gold reserves at a far higher price, something like $3,000 an ounce or more, and then use that paper wealth to back new spending. Think of it like refinancing your house when its value shoots up. You don't sell the home, you simply tap the higher appraisal to pull out cash. Washington can pledge those higher valued bars to the Federal Reserve, get dollars in return, and pour that money into the economy without officially adding to the national debt. Sounds clever, right? But here's the kicker. What if gold prices drop after the government locks in that new valuation? What if the market decides gold is worth far less tomorrow than the U.S. claims today? The Federal Reserve would be sitting on a pile of IOUs whose real-world value just sank, and the ripple effects could reach every corner of the financial system. This isn't just a what if, it's the kind of hidden risk that could shake global confidence in the dollar itself. And gold isn't the only shiny object in this story, because the next move is even more controversial, a brand new Bitcoin reserve that could change the way America stores, values, and spends its wealth. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear next will sound like something out of a crypto thriller, but it's happening right now behind real government doors. All right, buckle up, because this next piece of the puzzle takes us from gold's old shine to the digital glow of cryptocurrency. In early 2025, the White House quietly signed an executive order to create something brand new, a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Yes, you heard that right. The United States government is officially moving to hold Bitcoin, not just regulate it, not just tax it, but stockpile it like a digital form of gold. Now here's the wild part. Washington isn't planning to go on a buying spree with taxpayer dollars. Instead, they're using Bitcoin that's already in their possession. Coins seized from criminal cases, cybercrime busts, and fraud investigations. For years, the government's practice was to auction off these confiscated coins as quickly as possible, often selling them for a fraction of what they're worth today. Reports estimate those early fire sales cost the U.S. more than $17 billion in lost potential gains. So now the plan has flipped. Instead of dumping those coins into the market, the government will hold them, treating Bitcoin like a long-term strategic asset. And here's where it gets really interesting. Once that stash is locked in, the government can assign its own valuation, maybe $100,000 per Bitcoin, maybe higher, and use that declared value to unlock spending power. Picture this. Washington pledges a contract to the Federal Reserve stating it owns, say, 50,000 Bitcoins, each worth 100 grand on paper. They don't have to sell a single coin. They simply hand over the contract and say, here's proof of our digital wealth. Give us dollars to match it. The Fed issues cash, the government spends it on programs or debt payments, and technically, the national debt doesn't rise because it's not a traditional loan. It's an exchange of assets for liquidity. But what happens if the crypto market crashes? What if Bitcoin falls to 50,000, or even lower, after the government has pledged it at a six-figure value? The Federal Reserve would be stuck holding collateral worth far less than the dollars it issued. That imbalance could weaken the Fed's balance sheet, spook global lenders, and trigger a chain reaction of distrust in U.S. financial stability. And just when you think the story can't twist any further, a third move is already in motion. A brand new law that blends cryptocurrency with everyday money, potentially rewriting the very definition of a U.S. dollar. It's called the Genius Act, and it sets the stage for stablecoins tied directly to gold or Bitcoin. That's where we're heading next. And it could open a door to money creation unlike anything America has ever seen. Now, let's talk about the final piece of this financial experiment, a brand new law that sounds more like a tech startup than a government policy. It's called the Genius Act, and it gives the United States the power to create official stable coins, digital tokens backed by the value of gold or even Bitcoin that could circulate right alongside regular US dollars. On paper, the idea looks simple. If you can peg a digital coin to a strong asset, you can expand the money supply without technically adding to the national debt. Imagine paying for groceries, rent, or a car with a coin that represents a slice of gold or a fraction of a Bitcoin, all guaranteed by the US government. It's bold, futuristic, and completely untested on this scale. But here's where the danger lives. If gold prices tumble, or if Bitcoin loses half its value, those stable coins could suddenly be worth far less than the government promised. That collapse would feed straight into the Federal Reserve's books, making the dollar look weaker, and shaking confidence across global markets that depend on America's financial strength. And remember, the Fed isn't a regular bank, it isn't truly federal, and it doesn't hold giant cash reserves. Its credibility is its currency. If trust breaks, borrowing costs spike, the dollar loses shine, and every American feels the shock through higher prices, tighter credit, and a more fragile economy. So here's the big takeaway. Washington is testing new ways to spend without officially borrowing, from gold revaluations to Bitcoin pledges to digital stablecoins. If the values of those assets keep rising, the plan might look brilliant. But if they fall, the fallout could ripple through every bank account, every mortgage, and every retirement fund in this country. That's why staying informed isn't optional anymore. It's a financial survival skill. Keep an eye on these moves, ask tough questions, and don't rely on headlines alone. Dig deeper, track the numbers, and understand how these policies could touch your wallet. If this breakdown opened your eyes, hit that like button, share this video with friends and family who need to understand what's coming, and subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into the U.S. economy. Knowledge is power, and right now, power belongs to those who refuse to be caught off guard.